Dublin, Ireland, 2014. The heavy rain is lashing against the glass of a gleaming new tech headquarters in the financial district. Inside, an army of engineers, executives, and sales representatives are frantically processing billions of dollars in European ad revenue. It is the buzzing European hub of one of the most profitable technology companies on Earth. But if you look at the local tax filings sitting on the desks downstairs, you see a massive, glaring paradox. Despite billions of euros flowing through the servers humming in the basement, the company officially claims it is barely breaking even. They report almost zero local profit to the Irish government. It is not because the advertising business is failing. It is because the profit has been mathematically teleported to a no-tax mailbox sitting quietly on an island in the Atlantic Ocean. This is not an accounting error. This is a highly engineered pipeline designed to siphon wealth out of the countries where it is created and hide it where the taxman cannot reach it. This is the global tax heist. Let us step inside the mahogany boardroom to see exactly how this modern heist is pitched. A slick corporate accountant slides a thick manila folder across the table to the CEO. The accountant says, "Right now, you sell software in Germany, France, and Spain. They show huge revenues, and you are forced to pay a 30% corporate tax there." The CEO shakes his head and says, "That sounds terrible. How do we fix it?" The accountant smiles and says, "We do what the tech giants do. We move the most valuable thing you own, your intellectual property, to a tax haven." Before we show you exactly how they make the money disappear, you need to understand that the rules of global finance are written by a select few. If you want to stop getting played by the system, you have to understand it. Hit the subscribe button to join the few who actually understand how capital moves. Now, back to the boardroom. The CEO leans in. He asks, "So how do we move the rights to our code without the government's noticing?" The accountant walks to a whiteboard and draws two boxes. He points to the first box. He says, "We set up Irish Company 1. We incorporate it in Dublin, but here is the magic trick. We manage and control it from Bermuda. Under international tax law, that means it is a resident of Bermuda, where the corporate tax rate is exactly 0. We legally transfer all your global patents, trademarks, and search algorithms to this Bermudian ghost company." The CEO raises an eyebrow. He asks, "And what about the actual physical business operating in Europe?" The accountant points to the second box. He says, "That is Irish Company 2. A real office in Dublin with real employees. They sell the digital ads to customers in London and Paris and collect the cash. But because Irish Company 1 officially owns the code, Irish Company 2 has to pay them massive royalties for the right to use it. The royalty is a deductible business expense. We wipe out the European profit entirely, shifting it straight into the Bermudian vault." The CEO leans back in his leather chair, imagining billions piling up in a Caribbean account without a single tax inspector knocking on the door. It sounds like the perfect financial crime. But the accountant holds up a warning hand. He says, "There is a catch. If Irish Company 2 pays those massive royalties directly to a known tax haven like Bermuda, the Irish tax authorities will trigger a brutal withholding tax. They will take a massive cut of the cash the exact second it tries to leave the country. You cannot just wire billions from a high-tax jurisdiction to a zero-tax island without setting off alarm bells. The money is trapped. If they move it, they lose it." The CEO slams his fist on the table. He asks, "Then what is the point of this entire setup if the money is locked in Dublin?" The accountant smiles a very cold, very calculated smile. He says, "Because we are not going to send it straight to Bermuda. We are going to make a sandwich. Amsterdam, 2010. A quiet, snowy street lined with historic brick buildings and bicycles chained to iron fences. Inside a modest office block, there is a heavy oak door with a brass plaque listing dozens of the most powerful American tech companies. But inside this room, there are no servers. There are no software engineers writing code. There is barely a receptionist. This is a pure letterbox company. Yet billions of dollars are flowing through this tiny, silent room every single week. This room is the crucial missing link in the corporate tax evasion machine. The United States multinationals realized that the direct route from Ireland to Bermuda was entirely blocked by withholding taxes. They desperately needed a conduit. They needed a country with specific, highly permissive tax treaties that allowed massive amounts of money to flow in and out without friction. They found their perfect loophole hiding in the tulip fields of the Netherlands. The structure is so elegantly devastating that tax lawyers gave it a nickname: the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich. The CEO stares at the whiteboard, completely confused. He says, "You want us to set up a shell company in the Netherlands. Why? The Dutch have high corporate taxes too." The accountant picks up a blue marker. He draws a thick arrow from Dublin to Amsterdam. He says, "Because Ireland and the Netherlands have a very special tax treaty. If our Irish operating company pays its billions in royalties to a Dutch company, the Irish government does not charge a single cent in withholding tax." The CEO nods slowly, following the line. He asks, "Okay, but now all of our money is sitting in Amsterdam. Do the Dutch not tax it?" The accountant draws a second arrow from Amsterdam down to Bermuda. He says, "No. Under Dutch law, money paid out as royalties to another country is treated as invisible pass-through income. We set up a Dutch shell company. It receives the billions from Ireland on Monday, and on Tuesday, it forwards 99.8% of that cash directly to Bermuda." Imagine a massive water reservoir in Europe, representing all the taxable corporate profit. The governments desperately want to tap into it. The multinational builds a specialized plumbing system to drain the reservoir before the government can open their valves. The first pipe is the royalty fee, sucking the profit out of the operating company. The water flows into a specialized junction box in the Netherlands. This box is designed to do only one thing. It strips away the chemical markers that would trigger the local tax sensors. Once the water passes through the Dutch junction, it is completely invisible to the European authorities. It flows freely through a final underground pipe, straight into a private, untaxed vault in Bermuda. The operating company looks like it is dying of thirst, pleading poverty to the local tax authorities, while the parent company is drowning in a secret ocean of cash. By using this exact plumbing, major tech firms managed to slash their overseas tax rates to roughly 2.4%, while the working class paid full retail. The money is finally safe. The billions are successfully hidden offshore, completely legally, thanks to the intricate dance between Irish law, Dutch treaties, and Bermudian tax codes. The European tax base is left completely hollowed out, but as the CEO looks at the offshore mountain of cash on the whiteboard, he realizes a secondary, massive problem. This incredibly complex, multinational web of ghost companies is perfect for shielding foreign profits from foreign governments. But what about the money they make right at home? The multinational still operates massive storefronts and servers in California, New York, and Texas. Those individual states want their massive cut of the domestic revenue. You cannot run a Dutch sandwich on a retail hardware store in Ohio. The CEO asks the accountant, "This is great for Europe, but what about our American profits?" The accountant simply laughs and pulls out a map of the United States. He points a finger at a tiny sliver of land on the East Coast. He says, We do the exact same thing in Delaware. Wilmington, Delaware, 1209 North Orange Street. It is a single, unremarkable, one-story brick building sitting on a quiet intersection. It looks like a suburban dentist office. But this specific physical address is the legal home to nearly 300,000 businesses, including Apple, eBay, and Walmart. The air inside smells of stale coffee and paper dust. The filing cabinets are stacked securely to the ceiling, holding the dark secrets to the domestic version of the global tax heist. You do not need an ocean to hide your profits. You just need a state willing to turn a blind eye to intangible assets. This is the golden age of the corporate tax dodge. The aggressive tactics mastered in the Atlantic are deployed right in America's backyard, using what accountants quietly call the Passive Investment Company, or the PIC. It is the exact same royalty stripping mechanism weaponized against the infrastructure of the United States itself, completely starving state governments of the funds needed for schools, roads, and emergency services. The accountant points to the map of Delaware. He says, "Domestically, we spin your United States trademarks, your corporate logos, and your patents into a Delaware holding company." The CEO frowns, looking at the tiny state. He asks, "Why Delaware?" The accountant replies, "Because Delaware does not tax income generated from intangible assets." Now, your physical operating subsidiaries in high-tax states like California and New York have to pay massive royalties to the Delaware company just for the privilege of using your own brand name on your storefronts. The CEO smiles, fully catching on to the scam. He says, "So the California store makes $10 million in profit, but pays a $10 million licensing fee to Delaware." The accountant snaps his fingers. Exactly. The California store deducts the royalty as a business expense, reporting absolute zero profit to the state of California. The money safely lands in Delaware, where the state ignores the intangible income entirely. You just legally erased your state income tax burden by charging yourself rent. This is the domestic royalty strip. Think of it like renting the furniture in your own house from yourself, and using the rental receipts to prove to the IRS that you are broke. The operating company does all the actual heavy lifting. It hires the employees, sells the physical products, and deals with the customers. But the intellectual property holding company holds all the ultimate power. It is a pure parasitic relationship, constructed entirely on paper. The operating unit bleeds out its cash flow to feed the holding company. And because the holding company is geographically parked in a jurisdiction that willfully refuses to tax that specific type of income, the capital effectively vanishes from the public ledger. But the greed of the multinationals did not stop at domestic state tax evasion. They realized that if simply moving the intellectual property was this lucrative, what would happen if they moved the entire corporate identity? What if an iconic American brand stopped being American altogether to avoid the federal government entirely? The ultimate maneuver in this era of impunity was the corporate inversion. Pharmaceutical giant Pfizer attempted a massive $160 billion merger with an Irish-registered firm called Allergan. The goal was not medical synergy. The goal was to legally move Pfizer headquarters to Ireland, swapping the 35% United States tax rate for the 12.5% Irish rate, while keeping all its executives sitting comfortably in New York. The political backlash was fierce and immediate. The president railed against it, calling it a total betrayal of the country that funded their initial research. The Treasury eventually panicked and changed the rules to block the Pfizer deal. But the attempt exposed a terrifying reality to the global public. The biggest companies in the world considered their national citizenship to be entirely negotiable. The billions missing from state and federal budgets were starting to show. Potholes went unfixed, and in Europe, a single, devastating investigation was about to blow the lid off the biggest tax void in history. Brussels, 2016. The massive glass and steel headquarters of the European Commission. Exhausted regulators are huddled around long conference tables buried under mountains of redacted financial filings. They are tracking the flow of billions of euros generated by the sale of iPhones across the entire European continent. They follow the money trail straight to Ireland. But when they look at where the final tax is being paid, the trail suddenly evaporates into thin air. The regulators discover that a massive tech company managed to negotiate an effective tax rate on its European profits that fell from 1% to an astonishing 0.005%. That is 0.005 of 1%. If an average citizen paid that rate, their entire annual tax bill would be the price of a single cup of coffee. The European Commission regulators stare at the documents in absolute horror. They realise this is no longer just clever accounting. This is state-sponsored financial warfare against the very concept of public funding. An EU investigator sits across from a nervous Irish tax official in a brightly lit interrogation room. The investigator slams a thick document on the table. He says, "We are looking at Apple Sales International and Apple Operations Europe. They are incorporated in Ireland. They book billions in profit here. Why are they paying almost nothing in tax?" The official calmly replies, "Because, according to our rulings, the vast majority of their profits are allocated to their head offices." The investigator narrows his eyes. He asks, "Where exactly are these head offices?" The official shifts uncomfortably in his chair. He says, "They are not physically anywhere. They have no employees. They have no premises." The investigator stares in sheer disbelief. He says, "So you are telling me that billions of euros in real-world sales are being attributed to a ghost office that exists only on paper, and therefore the profit is stateless. It is tax resident nowhere on earth." The official nods slowly. Yes, that is the agreement. This was the ultimate, terrifying evolution of the intellectual property game. It bypassed the need for Bermuda or the Netherlands entirely. The mechanism relied on a bizarre, hyper-specific misalignment of international residency laws. At the time, United States law said a company is taxed exactly where it is incorporated. Irish law said a company is taxed exactly where it is managed and controlled. The multinational simply incorporated the subsidiary in Ireland, but managed the company from the United States. It fell perfectly into the legislative gap between the two laws. To the United States, it was an Irish problem. To Ireland, it was an American problem. The profit was effectively marooned in international waters, totally stateless. The Irish government issued special private tax rulings, allowing the company to allocate almost all its taxable profit to this stateless entity. It was an artificial financial void, a black hole designed to swallow massive amounts of capital and never let it see the light of a public treasury. It was a masterpiece of evasion. The European Commission did not just issue a stern warning. They dropped a nuclear bomb on the tech industry. They officially ruled that the special tax agreements between Ireland and the massive multinational were not just unfair, they constituted illegal state aid. By giving one specific company a massive exclusive tax benefit, Ireland was illegally distorting the free market. The European Court ordered the company to repay an unfathomable 13 billion euros in back taxes. The financial headlines exploded. The working public was furious. The era of the double Irish and the stateless profit void seemed to be crashing down. Under immense international pressure from the OECD and the European Union, the Irish government finally relented. They proudly announced the permanent closure of the infamous double Irish loophole. The game was up. The politicians patted themselves on the back, declaring a total victory over corporate greed. But inside the mahogany boardrooms, the corporate accountants were not packing up their briefcases. They were simply opening a brand new folder. Dublin, 2020. The final sunset of the grandfathered double Irish loophole. The financial district is calm. The politicians are standing at podiums, giving triumphant press conferences about tax fairness, global cooperation, and the end of the Haven era. But up in the towering glass skyscrapers, the heavy-duty industrial shredders are humming. The old structural diagrams are being physically destroyed. The Dutch sandwich is officially taken off the menu forever. But there is absolutely no panic in the eyes of the corporate treasurers. They are drinking expensive champagne. The public truly believes the crash of the offshore tax system has finally arrived. They think the hidden billions will finally flow back into the hospitals, the public schools, and the failing infrastructure. But the public does not understand that multinational capital is exactly like water. If you dam up the river, the water does not just disappear. It just finds a new crack in the rock. The loud crash of the old system was merely the quiet birth of a much more complex monster. The CEO paces the boardroom nervously, loosening his tie. He asks the accountant, "The EU just slammed a €13 billion fine on our biggest competitor. The double Irish is totally dead. The Dutch are implementing strict withholding taxes. Is it over? Do we actually have to pay 20% tax now?" The accountant calmly sips his black coffee. He says, "Absolutely not. The regulators just closed the front door, so we are going through the side window. We are pivoting to the single malt." The CEO stops pacing. He asks, "The single malt? What is that?" The accountant smiles. He says, "Ireland cannot let us route our money to Bermuda anymore. But they still have active tax treaties with other countries, like Malta and the Emirates. We just move our central management to Malta instead. It is the exact same royalty stripping game, just wearing a different hat. Or we use the green jersey. The pipeline is not fundamentally broken. We just changed the names on the plumbing." The mechanism simply evolved from a geopolitical loophole into a pure valuation game. Instead of relying on a sneaky physical route through the Netherlands, companies began using massive cost-sharing agreements and transfer pricing manipulation. A parent company in a high-tax jurisdiction funds the research and development of a new software program. Right before the software becomes massively profitable, they sell the intellectual property to their own affiliate in a low-tax jurisdiction for pennies, legally claiming the technology is untested and worthless. Once the software hits the market and generates billions, the low-tax affiliate reaps all the rewards and charges the high-tax parent massive royalties to use it. The governments try to enforce arm's-length pricing, saying affiliates must charge each other fair market value. But how do you precisely determine the fair market value of a search algorithm that has never existed before in human history? You cannot. And the massive armies of corporate tax lawyers use that exact ambiguity to justify moving the wealth wherever they please. The governments realised they were playing an endless, exhausting game of whack-a-mole. Every single time they closed a loophole in Ireland, a new one instantly opened in Singapore or Luxembourg or the Cayman Islands. The realisation hit the global financial regulators like a runaway freight train. You cannot fight a global, completely borderless capital network using fragmented, slow-moving national tax laws. The system was fundamentally broken because sovereign nations were actively competing against each other, slashing their own corporate rates in a desperate race to the bottom just to attract the tech giants. The OECD knew that if they did not force a global treaty, the corporate tax base would eventually hit absolute zero everywhere. So, they proposed something entirely unprecedented. A financial superweapon designed to end the tax havens once and for all. A global minimum tax. But as the ink dries on this historic international agreement, a terrifying new reality is taking shape in the shadows of the financial sector. Present day. A massive digital map of global capital flows illuminates a dark financial monitoring room. Glowing lines of data represent billions of dollars pulsing aggressively across oceans every single millisecond. The routes have changed entirely. They completely bypass the old Bermuda triangles. They snake through new, incredibly complex hybrid entities in Eastern Europe and Asia. The OECD Pillar 2 initiative, the 15% global minimum tax, is supposed to be the ultimate firewall. It mandates that if a company pays less than 15% in a haven, their home country can tax them to make up the exact difference. It sounds like a total, monumental victory for the everyday taxpayer. But watch the glowing lines on the map. The sheer volume of capital fleeing high-tax jurisdictions has not slowed down for a single second. It has actually accelerated. The heist has not been stopped by the regulators. It has merely been institutionalized by them. The era of the chaotic loophole is over. The era of the permanent bypass has begun. A young regulator stares at the pulsing data map, exhausted and defeated. He says to his senior director, "We passed the global minimum tax. We successfully implemented Pillar 2. Why are they still stripping profits out of Germany and California?" The director heavily sighs, adjusting his glasses. He says, "Because 15% is still a lot less than 30%. We did not end the tax havens. We just created a global, legally protected price floor for them." The regulator shakes his head. He asks, "But what about the intellectual property? Did we stop them from moving the crown jewels offshore?" The director points to a massive data node glowing brightly in a jurisdiction nobody is actively watching. He says, "No, they just hire elite valuation firms to legally declare the intellectual property was always worth less when it was created and infinitely more once it lands in the haven. It was never about evasion, son. It was about pure design. We are trying to catch an ocean with a fishing net." The new global minimum tax is highly complex, but it operates on a simple, fatal flaw. It still relies entirely on the fundamental concept of transfer pricing and intellectual property ownership. The corporate structure simply adapts to the new rules. If a tax haven is forcefully required to charge 15%, the haven government will quietly offer the corporation massive, opaque subsidies and tax credits in other operational areas, effectively bringing the real tax rate back down to zero behind closed doors. They call these qualified refundable tax credits. The operating companies still pay massive royalties to the holding companies. The profits are still ruthlessly stripped from the local economies. The only major difference is that the accounting gymnastics required to hide the money have become so incredibly complex that only the top 0.1% of corporate law firms can execute them. The barrier to entry for tax avoidance has been aggressively raised, ensuring that only the absolute biggest global monopolies can afford to play the game, leaving smaller businesses to foot the bill. The global tax heist of the double Irish and the Dutch sandwich was never truly defeated. It was just the beta test for the modern financial era. As long as a line of code or a brand logo can be legally owned by a ghost company on an island, the wealth generated by the working class will continue to be siphoned upward and outward. The infrastructure of our cities crumbles, while the stateless profits of the tech and pharmaceutical empires grow to the size of sovereign nations. The system is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed to work by the people who built it. The era of the tax haven is not over. It has simply become invisible to the untrained eye. This is the chilling reality of the global capital pipeline. If you want to survive the coming economic shift, you cannot just watch the headlines. You have to watch the plumbing. Hit subscribe to stay ahead of the system, because the next heist is already underway.